Well, good morning, everybody, and this is your host, Curtis Martin with Antelope Valley Clean Cities. We are in the midst of investigating the future of heavy-duty transportation in the transit bus section. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I had BYD Motors, Inc. on the air talking about their new electric bus that was coming to market in the U.S. They'd headquartered themselves in L.A. They'd opened a manufacturing plant in northern L.A. County, and we had our discussion on the technology and the advantages and the benefits of electric buses in general, and it fairly well covered the topic. But in the interlude, there's been some controversial press that's made its way to the internet that I really wanted to go back and dig into a little bit more. So today I am bringing on the air Micheal Austin, who is Vice President of North American Operations for BYD. And Micheal, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to join us on the air today.
Thank you very much for inviting us today.
Now, in all frankness, I did post, well, let me back up a little bit. In la.streetblogs.org, there was an article that came out talking about the BYD bus, and it really leveled a few charges at the company that were rather strong. I mean, they had quite the left an aftertaste if you read the article, and they either leave you with a very negative opinion or a very strong urge to fire back. Well, in my particular case, I was aware of some of the facts that were misrepresented in that article or left out altogether, and I posted a response to that. Well, going back this morning to review the verbiage that I had posted in that response, I have found that my response is apparently missing from the comments section of that article, so it looks like it's been removed. But I'd actually like to start with discussing that article with you, Micheal, if you don't mind.
Sure, that's not a problem.
All right. Now, also, we had a caller show up on the switchboard from the 3-1 area code. Caller, I've left your mic open. If you have a question for the guest or a comment during the show, please feel free to let us know. Just clear your throat, interrupt, say excuse me, just let us know you're there and you want to make a comment. All right, so back to this article. Now, the article was written by Brian Addison in la.streetblogs.org, which I'm really not that familiar with this particular online news source. But the thing about online news is you never know who's going to pick it up. You never know if it's going to go viral. You never know what help or harm it can do once it's put out there. It's like throwing some bait into the ocean. You don't know if it's going to be a little nibbler pick it up or a great white shark. So I want to kind of clear the air on this and kind of go through this article and address some of these disparaging comments that have been made about BYD, and you can either validate them or you can, give a response to them that represents your side. So essentially, we're giving you equal time to clear the air on this particular article.
Thank you.
And this is a quote from this article, says, last week Metro postponed a decision to procure 30 zero-emissions buses despite all support for electric transit. I regard the vote with mixed feelings. As much as we want to say green is green, that is all. But no matter how we go about doing it, increasing zero-emissions usage is a good thing despite the means. And that has been kind of the mentality in California for quite some time. We want to clean the air in L.A. It's historically had one of the worst air quality issues in the nation. And obviously going green is the target. And regardless of how you get there has been kind of the sentimentality, but in recent years, there's been more of a focus on supporting the American economy, supporting the California economy. But the author here goes on to say that in this case, I fear we've been duped. first in Long Beach, and what could very well be Los Angeles if the Metro Board votes the way that its staff is recommending it votes. So apparently last March, Long Beach Transit signed a procurement order for 10 electric buses, and this article is referencing that purchase as having been a mistake. Now, you've read the article as well, and why do you feel that this Brian Addison is coming forward and saying that Long Beach has been duped into buying buses by BYD?
Well, I don't know all of Brian Addison's motives. This is actually the second attack in the press that he has made personally. The first one was on Long Beach Post, which is who I think he works for. Most of the quotes in both of his articles come from very strong investors of our competitors that did lose, unfortunately, I think, in both evaluations. At Long Beach they lost, and also at the Metro they lost. So our competitors are certainly not happy that they didn't get the awards. I can understand that, and they've been influencing Brian Addison's opinion. Some of the statements of fact are incorrect. The one statement of fact that BYD doesn't exist in California or hasn't existed is false. BYD established our headquarters on 1800 Figueroa Street. You can go there. You can visit. We have buses, electric buses, and cars on display. We have about 40 L.A. County folks that are working there. That headquarters has changed in its first purpose. It was originally just to be a portal for launching all of our green products across the United States. It since then has changed. It now is the portal for launching all our green products across the Americas. We have a South America presence now. We've launched electric buses in Bogota and in Uruguay, and you'll see news from Chile. We're launching electric taxi fleets there as well. LA is the headquarters for our America's presence. So a number of folks we hired, we shipped out to Latin America, but we're still very much on track to meeting all of our hiring quotas. Now, when we moved to Los Angeles, there was a very great incentive established to hire a certain number of individuals from LA County, and we moved into that specific area because it's great for branding. There's a lot of assets to move to LA. But our contract with LA was for 58 people by August 2015. We're well on our track to meet that quota of 58 hires by 2015. And I would tell you that over half of those hires have been folks that didn't have jobs before in LA that we've hired. So it's a great story from the headquarters aspect. Yes, we are progressing with our plans for fleet sales. We've been selling electric LED lighting systems and solar systems prior to getting the first model year 2012 E6s certified by the EPA and the DOT FMVSS, Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Certified. That happened this year. Our electric buses, we imported the first couple buses to do the demos. But the great news story that's been, I guess, misconstrued by Brian Addison is that there are two factories that have opened in Lancaster, California, one factory to build electric buses, the second factory to build the electric modules for fixed energy storage and for the electric buses. So a very great news story because Californians will be building these California buses for Long Beach using California labor. So it's a great story. It's one that's kind of been missed by Brian and a lot of the media outlets that have echoed Brian's sentiments. These are California buses being built by California labor for that Long Beach order. So that's a great news story in my opinion. We've got Chinese money coming to build factories in America. I can't imagine a better story than that.
Well, I have to admit that, quite frankly, I'm a little tired of seeing every product on the shelf in every store that you go into is you know, if you read it, it's made in China, which nothing wrong with that, although you see a great outflux of American dollars and American wealth to China, Korea, Taiwan, all these foreign countries. And we're in a time of international trade imbalances, and it makes it difficult to see American jobs and American dollars going overseas strictly for the benefit of cheap labor at the cost of this nation's economic security.
Yeah.
And personally, I find it somewhat refreshing to see those American dollars that have gone overseas, not direct return, but coming back from Chinese companies into the U.S. and creating American jobs and bolstering the American economy by doing so. Now, if I'm not mistaken, the whole thing with Shenzhen's, if I say this wrong, forgive me, Shenzhen's China coming or bringing their business to California actually started at the state governor's office level, Jerry Brown. Is that correct?
Yeah, in fact, a lot of I would say it started even before Jerry Brown. Arnold Schwarzenegger and his team was involved with the Go Biz team. Of course, has been renamed Go Biz, but before that, they were very, very much involved in trying to attract business to the state of California, specifically foreign businesses, to build factories and create green tech jobs. Specific green tech jobs, and that is a great story for California, because BYD did select California to put our headquarters for all the Americas, and then to make that the launching point for all of our green products, and then even to bring the electric bus manufacturing. Now, I will tell you that this electric bus uses rare earth metals that cannot be found in the United States. So we have to import those rare earth metals, which are in the form of our in-wheel hub motors. Those come from China. They couldn't come from the U.S. unless we went with a less attractive inductive motor. But rare earth metals for the most part come from China. A lot of the chemistries in the batteries today come from China. Even some of the biggest manufacturers in the United States, A123, who unfortunately has been resold back to the Chinese, was a U.S. company for a while. They outsourced majority of their cell manufacturing to China, not just for the low labor, but because that's where a lot of the base chemistries come from. So we won't get away from being a global economy. There are places in the world where we have to get lithiated cobalt, where we have to go get lithium and other types of metals. We have to go there to get those things. I will also say that most of the power MOSFETs, which go into the IGBTs, which become the inverters in a lot of these buses, unfortunately, there aren't a lot of wafer fabs left in the United States to meet that demand. Most of those wafer fabs are overseas. Again, so those power MOSFETs, IGBTs, are majority of those electronics for any car that we build today or any electric bus, which uses a lot of inverters, unfortunately come from overseas. What I think BYD is trying to do, and I think all bus manufacturers, all the Canadian bus manufacturers that also manufacture in the U.S., or German bus companies or train companies that come to the U.S., they try very hard to meet the compliance rules in the United States, which are called the Buy America rules. I think they were established in 1985, that require 60% of the materials to come from U.S. sources. And again, with so much of the other components coming from China, it takes almost building the entire bus frame and body in the U.S. in order to meet those Buy America requirements, which is one of the reasons BYD said, you know what, we need to have a factory, a presence in the U.S. to meet and comply with all the U.S. regulations.
And I know your competitor's bus runs, at least the competitor that you're running with. There's actually two additional companies that are coming into the market. I don't know that they actually have a product on the market yet. But back to the article that we've been discussing.
Okay.
and I'm quoting here, it says, Ryan Papel, an investment banker with Klein Perkins Caulfield and Byers, was adamant in not only his support for your competitor at the meeting, but brought forth scathing accusations regarding the statistics BYD used in order to gain traction in the contract. Is he saying that you guys are padding your numbers, or what I'm really after here is what is the vetting process that these municipalities go through to make the decision on which bus to buy? Are they looking at your statistics on paper, their statistics on paper, and going, eeny, meeny, miny, mo? Or is there something a bit more involved that gets them to that buying decision that this is the company we're going to do business with?
So Ryan Papel is a strong investor in our competitor, one of the largest competitors at the Long Beach that lost this particular award. So anything that Ryan Papel says or their investors, competitor investors say, I think should be discounted or at least held as but the vetting process is pretty clear. You first submit what your statistics are, specific running, efficiencies, etc., and that is placed into a formula that the Long Beach Transit team had. It was an evaluation criteria set out very clearly in the RFQ. So there was no under the table going on, I think, with the process, and BYD backed up our numbers further with testing. We fortunately had a bus with similar technology. We got an echo going on. Do you hear that?
Yeah, we do. That's strange. You're repeating the same phrase over and over. Not a sound effect of my doing. Sounds like a technological glitch here. Interesting. Let me try something here.
It's gone now. So the vetting process was easier for BYD because we had a long-range bus that was equivalent in the technology we were going to build in Lancaster. We brought it to their site. We had the advantage of being able to send that bus to the same route that they were wanting to run these electric buses on. We ran it loaded with sandbags, 9,000 pounds of sandbags, equivalent to a full standing passenger load. I think that is like 60 passengers total on a 40-foot bus, and ran it in service. I would say we ran it in shadow service, so we ran it behind one of their buses, braking at the same locations, and we collected real-time data with a real-time system that went the entire route the entire day. Now, our advantage was that we didn't have to do any in-route charging, so we didn't have to throw any infrastructure in this test to be able to bring back data that proved exactly the numbers that we had provided to Long Beach. Our competition quoted different types of systems, and some of those systems required in-route charging, which you literally can't run that bus as a trial on those routes unless you do it as a partial trial. You can't run it all day, the whole day in service and show the numbers. So I believe our competition provided data from existing transit authorities where they were running their buses, but they had to provide those data from other trials. We were able to show them on their exact route what the data would be. And so it gave, I would say it didn't give us any different advantage, except it probably made our numbers a little more credible to the team that was vetting those numbers. So that was one, I would call it in the end, that was one advantage. When the competition challenged our numbers, the Long Beach Transit, the board, knew exactly where those numbers came from. They came from real testing on their roads. So it's hard for a competitor to try to speak to another competitor's advantage or disadvantage when they aren't speaking to facts. And that's what I think Long Beach found in their board meetings with the competitors' witnesses. They were flawed. They were biased investors, and they were flawed in their analysis because they tried to thwart the process. The process was very open. It was a very public tender, and I believe the best technology won.
Curtis.
Sounds like, yes, sir.
Yes, we do have 818 on the line with a question, and caller 310, I did mute you, so if you have a question, please press 1, and they'll flag me to open up your mic.
All right, caller from the 818 area code. This is the host of the show, Curtis Martin, and you are?
Yeah, hi there.
Hi there. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I find this whole thing to be a very interesting conversation here. I think in the end, what always matters is the quality of the product for the dollar value. And based on what's being said here, it appears that the electric bus is really the next level in public transportation.
I would agree.
As would I. I mean, realistically, especially in California, what they're looking for at the California Air Resources Board, or ARB's level, is they're looking for zero emissions transportation in the medium and heavy duty section. That's the ultimate end of the rainbow goal. The reality is that it's a long, hard process to get there. It's a extended transitionary period, and they are driving that migration to near zero and zero emissions vehicles through regulatory constraints that are being applied over time. And those regulatory constraints get tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. Now, some companies like BYD are going directly to the end game and shooting right at the ultimate goal, and that is a zero emissions product that performs in the field the way that these organizations' conventional vehicles have performed in the past. So everybody's used to the diesel. Then they got used to having to put particulate traps to clean up the diesel. Then they're getting used to tighter emissions requirements and smaller diesel particulate filtering. And the idea is to get the air cleaner and cleaner and cleaner. So if you jump directly to the end game and shoot right at zero emissions, then there's an argument, okay, it's just displaced carbon because now the manufacturer, the electric producer, if it's a coal-fired power plant, is really where the pollution from that vehicle is attributed, because they're emitting pollution at the power generation facility it's just displaced from the vehicle itself, but it's really connected to the vehicle. But in California, we continue to green our electric mix, and with the fully developed aspects of natural gas and fracking and that whole conversation becoming a reality, energy in this country has become cheap if you're using natural gas. So a great number of power plants are transitioning to natural gas power. They've historically been set up to run natural gas, diesel, coal, whatever happens to be the cheapest fuel supply at the time, and they can transition between one and the other for the financial benefits they offer. But now they're switching to natural gas. It's brought pollution levels back to mid-1990s levels across the country just with that one transition over. So electric is really the only fuel source for vehicles that continues to get greener as time goes by. So, caller, to address what you were saying, that...
Yeah, in fact, can I interject something, Curtis?
Yes, I think we just lost Curtis. So did you
Let me
have
interject.
another question? Go ahead.
Actually, for the caller, the 818 caller, to support what he just said, I'll give a few data points. So this is a U.S. company, a U.S. transit. It's a private transit company that ran our buses in service in two different time periods, one in a summer service and one in a winter cycle. They had run their diesel buses at about $1.11 per mile, and that includes a fuel cost of about $4 per gallon diesel, because the diesel buses, those 40-foot buses, get about 3.6 miles per gallon. Now, that depends on driver utilization and of course, the type of route. But at $1.10 per mile, that's what they had established. Now, in Los Angeles, there was a push to convert to natural gas. So this private company moved to natural gas, it costs when they, and by the way, natural gas is not expensive. It's only $1.50 gallon equivalent in the LA area approximately, and they implemented that across several of their buses. I think over 20, and they got about 2.1 miles per gallon equivalent. But because the natural gas was so inexpensive, it cost them only 75 cents per mile. So they went from $1.10 per mile in fuel cost to 75 cents per mile with a natural gas bus. When they ran our electric bus using the LADWP cost of electricity at about 11 cents per kilowatt hour, charging only at night off peak, they were able to get 21 cents per mile equivalent. So again, the numbers were $1.11 per mile for the diesel cost, about 75 cents per mile at the natural gas cost, and then the electric was 21 cents per mile. And this was with loaded buses over the same time period. So drastically less expensive to run an electric bus in service than a natural gas or diesel. The only thing I'd add is that they did find that even though natural gas buses ran at a lower fuel cost per mile, they did require more maintenance costs because the natural gas was not a self-lubricating fuel, so they had to rebuild the engines more frequently. So it was actually a wash going from diesel to natural gas as far as the economic benefits, but of course the environmental benefits are still being argued about natural gas versus diesel. Electric clearly is the winner. It's clearly the winner from an environmental perspective with zero emissions, zero direct emissions, as Curtis was talking about at the very beginning, and a big winner from an economic standpoint at literally a fifth the cost of a diesel or a natural gas. And with so fewer parts, we anticipate that the maintenance cost will be dramatically less on an electric vehicle, just as we've heard in the media that internal combustion engines with all their working fuels and their oils and their lubricants and of course the transmissions that come with that engine, they have a number of parts. It's about 50% fewer parts in an electric vehicle, an electric-only vehicle. So with 50% fewer parts, we'd anticipate a significant drop in the maintenance cost and an increase in the reliability. So the caller was talking about, the value, the quality per dollar, or the value. We believe electrified public transportation, even electrified transportation, is a great value for the public transits, and it'll be a great value in the future for consumers when the prices come down.
Obviously the business case, is easily made, just if you presented nothing more than the figures you just presented. Now let's stay on topic here and let's get back to this argument.
I have one last question.
Article. Yes, go ahead.
Curtis, I have one last question. Okay. I mean, you're at zero emissions with the electric bus. Is there any prospect for increasing the range within a fair amount of time?
So the 818 caller is absolutely right. And BYD's goal is to put our public buses into public transit without any changes in their route blocking or their route planning, basically be ubiquitous in service to the existing technology. In order to do that in China, it takes a bus that runs about 140 miles per day. In the United States, in LA, there are certain areas where 80% of the routes probably are suitable for 150 or less miles. But there's about 20% of the routes that go over that. And today, electric buses, BYD's electric bus, goes about 155 miles to up to 200 miles, depending on the type of stops, the number of stops, or regenerative braking. But the minimum is about 155 miles in service, which meets with probably 80% of most transit companies' routes. We do anticipate increasing that range. The range will be increased by a number of factors. The first most factor will be teaching drivers how to drive electric vehicles. there is a certain way you can drive electric vehicles, and specifically in transits, smoother braking, understanding that throwing on the gas pedal and quick acceleration drains the battery faster. So driver training is key to extending your range, but adding more battery in a bus is not as difficult as adding more battery in a small commuter vehicle. A bus has a lot more space for battery, and the more battery, the more range. Today, in order to achieve that 155-mile minimum, BYD puts about 324 kilowatt hours of battery packs. And that, by the way, is that's about as maximum as you want for weight. The increase in energy density would be able to drive up that range, and I would say the transit world is seeing about an 8 to 10% increase with electrified buses using technology year over year. So there's about a 5 to 8% increase in the energy densities of cells. There's no, unfortunately, rechargeable cells don't follow Moore's law in improvement cycles, so we haven't seen dramatic changes in energy density since the late, or I guess I would say the early 90s, when we went from a nickel-metal hydride to a lithium-ion, lithium-cobalt systems. So that was a dramatic breakthrough, and I haven't seen anything dramatic like that in energy density changes, even with nanotube technology and some of the new chemistries. There's been great incremental improvements, and I think the greatest improvement has been the cost and the environmentally friendliness of the battery chemical systems. So that answers his question, Curtis. I know you want to get back to the topic originally.
Well, that leads me to one last question. Is there any chance that you'll have an energy source like Iron Man?
Like Iron Man. I love this caller. Yeah, I believe in cold fusion. It's in the future. I wish that we did have an energy source like Iron Man.
Just make the bus a little bit longer, put the fusion reactor in the back, we're done. Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you,
Well,
Carl.
I'll be waiting for that because I'm still waiting for the Jetson age.
Exactly.
I'm still waiting for an Iron Man suit, All right. But I think you got to be heartless to get one. All right. So back to this article. Okay. Anyway, back to Brian's article. There was an accusation that BYD had made announcements that they were building headquarters in Los Angeles and Canada, and that both had failed to appear. Now, from my perspective, I've been to the LA headquarters. It doesn't necessarily give me the impression when I walked in that it's a fully blown, fully staffed facility, but there are vehicles on display there. There is a shop in the back that is very busy. There are buses coming and going, being trucked in, trucked out, delivered, driven, whatever they're being done, but there were a number of buses there as well. And there was a number of staff that I met with. I met with at least a dozen people on my last visit down there, and they're blatantly saying that this location is not brick and mortar, it's smoke and mirrors, as well as a Canada location. So can you really address that for me for a minute?
Sure. So certainly while we were looking for a headquarters, we spoke with numerous communities and talked to a number of locations. We obviously did not make promises to locate our headquarters in numerous locations, nor did we promise to make manufacturing sites in numerous locations. We did a contract with the city of LA. We put our headquarters in LA at 1800 South Figueroa. Like you said, it's real. It's not virtual. I already addressed the number of folks we have working there. We do have plans to increase that. We have open requisitions now. People can go online and apply for jobs at BYD at our R&D center. We also will be expanding our crews at the factory in Lancaster. We have the electric bus factory that we formally opened on May 1st. And Curtis, I think you may have been even at that Lancaster factory. So that one is not a virtual factory. That's a real factory. Now, we don't plan on getting all of the equipment in for manufacturing and have manufacturing buzzing until late this year. but it is a real brick and mortar factory. We have sales presence in Chicago. We have sales presence in Cupertino. We have sales presence in Canada. We certainly have worked with those communities to investigate manufacturing. There has been no promises in any of those areas. We do anticipate that as the market grows in certain regions, that we'll have needs and potentially manufacturing needs. I believe that if the EV market, the consumer EV market expands, BYD will want to build consumer EVs in the U.S., but it's all market dependent. Our solar manufacturing today is predominantly in China, but we would love to do panel lamination and manufacturing in the U.S. if that market expanded. But we're very cautious. We're very conservative as a company, and we don't make promises that we can't keep. We have audacious goals. We have big plans, but those plans do change. And just as the market changes, we will try to be as flexible as the market is, and whether it's expand our plans or constrict our plans, we will follow very cautiously. But we are optimistic about the U.S. market. So, like you said, to counter that, they are real. They're not virtual.
All right. According to Brian's article, there was a article in the Long Beach Post that said that your test trial performance analysis of your buses was fabricated extensively. Now, I know you've spoken to that in saying that, you did a shadow test with their actual existing fleet of buses that paralleled what they're doing now and gave them about as solid of a result as they're going to get. I mean, I'm not just looking at your statistics on paper. I'm driving your bus and it's doing what it says it's going to do. How can the Long Beach Post put out something like that without a retaliation from BYD?
Well, there are certain things we choose to respond to and certain things we don't. We could have addressed that by saying we have over 100 million kilometers of bus data and electric vehicle data across the world. But they would have retaliated by saying, okay, well, how many miles in the U.S.? Well, I think we have probably less than 50,000 miles tested in the U.S. So, responding that the roads in Los Angeles are not any different than the roads in downtown Beijing or Shanghai or Shenzhen, and that they should look at that 100 million kilometers of service data and say, yeah, okay, we know what the efficiency of their buses will be. We could have argued that, but instead we just chose to keep quiet. We until there is third-party test data generated or the transits have themselves evaluated the bus, which our advantage was Long Beach had evaluated our bus themselves. The Los Angeles Metro has numerous times evaluated our bus. So the agitators, I think their cries fell on deaf ears because we had real data. And I would tell you there was no other bid submitter to the Long Beach bid that ran shadow tests like we did and provided real-world data like we did. So it's hard for us to hear, that someone quoting our competitors saying that it's fabricated data when we know the truth. And but the good news is our customers knew the truth, and so we let our customers speak for us. We didn't have to speak against that. And fighting the media, is like trying to
shadow boxing.
Yeah, it is shadow boxing. So we just let it die. I don't know how much exposure any of Brian Addison's information gets widely.
And honestly, I don't either, but you never... Yes, John.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. We do have a question from area code 310.
Caller from 310 area code. Who are you and what's your question?
Hi, Curtis. Paul Condran, City of Culver City.
Hello, Paul. Welcome
how are you?
To the show. Very
Thank
good.
You.
And how are you today?
I'm doing very well. I love the program. I'm an avid Thursday morning listener. I just wanted to say to the gentleman of BYD, we're going to have to agree to disagree when it comes to natural gas-powered vehicles. I don't believe what you said is true. Number two, as far as the BYD all-electric bus, it is not a zero-emission vehicle, so let's be clear. Number three, are you meeting Buy America today?
So let's start with the first point. What I represented for the natural gas data was a customer data set. 75 cents per mile was what they were getting. So I did represent that as a fact. So I'm not sure if that's what you were disagreeing with, the 75 cents per mile cost. Is that what you're disagreeing with?
No, I'm moreover disagreeing with the operating profile. You had mentioned that, natural gas and diesel are, clean diesel technologies are as clean to each other, and that is completely false, quite frankly. You also mentioned that, natural gas has higher emissions and experienced tremendous engine failures because of the loss of lubricity from the fuel. That is false, and I have data to support that, for years of data to support that. And like I said, we'll have to agree to disagree at this point. I saw the BYD bus at a local association event that actually we hosted. I'm vice president of the Municipal Equipment Maintenance Association here in Southern California. The bus is impressive, and I was curious to know now, moreover than anything else, if today you are meeting Buy America requirements. And what I mean by that is that transit properties that use federal capital money to buy buses, and 99% of the transit properties in the United States purchase their vehicles using this methodology, have to ensure that 60% of the vehicle or more, it has a validated component audit, by the way, is built in the United States of America with United States labor. We have to report that to the FTA, the Federal Transit Administration. When I saw the vehicle, and I think the meeting was in January or February, the gentleman I spoke to wasn't sure whether or not at that point in time they were meeting Buy America. So I'm just curious to find out if, in fact, you are unequivocally meeting Buy America today.
So there's been 2 third-party audits, and they've been pre-audits, clearly, of the Lancaster factory. Long Beach hired one of their own third parties to come in and do an audit of the BYD Lancaster facility in the process, and it was somewhere north of 70% Buy America compliant, which is similar to a lot of the competition. We did our own third party as well and got a similar result. So the pre-Buy America audit, which are usually required by any transit that's doing a public tender, cleared that hurdle. Now, there will be follow-up audits as the buses are being manufactured for Long Beach. And, of course, I can't speak to us passing all those, but we've had, two successful audits so far. So the answer to the question is the Long Beach buses that will be built in Lancaster, California, they will be, we're getting some feedback, they will be Buy America compliant. The one that you probably saw, Paul, being tested was probably an imported bus that did not meet Buy America. So the associate that was speaking to you is probably accurate, that the bus you saw in trials was not built in the Lancaster facility, so therefore it was not Buy America compliant. So
yeah, sure, thank you. I realized that was a test product. Like I said initially, the vehicle was impressive, and but I was just curious as to know now. Do you have any orders beyond Long Beach Transit in the U.S.?
So we do have some private company orders, and the article that we're talking about on this show was addressing a secondary order that was 3 times larger than the Long Beach orders that the Metro had forwarded to their board for review to award BYD the Metro buses that were on RFQ.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure, Paul. Thank you.
All right, Paul. And Paul brings up a very valid point. Is across the industry, when you have one product selling against another, and in this case electric versus natural gas, you can pick up data sets that can show any number of different outcomes. Those outcomes can be flavored by selecting which data set you wish to represent and how it looks in comparison to what you have, or it just happens to be the one you came across that you perceived as valid, without maybe evaluating and comparing that to others that may be more favorable or may represent a better average result than the individual testing that was picked up on. So data is something that can be, I won't say manipulated, but it can be spun one way or another, just depending on whether you want to show the sunny side or the shady side of that particular data set. So natural gas, and I'll leave it at this, is a great alternative. Electric is a great alternative. As long as we are reducing our petroleum consumption, and I'm fuel neutral. Don't get me wrong, I love natural gas, and I see great promise for electric. But as long as we are reducing petroleum consumption in this country and cleaning the air in our cities, I have nothing against either fuel source, and it's up to the individual consumer or purchaser of that technology to determine what works best in their particular application. So enough said on that particular topic. So let's go ahead, Joe.
Go ahead, Michael. Finish your comment, and then I had a question.
No, I was just saying that I agree with Curtis.
Okay, quick question. For a municipality looking to expand their, or basically to qualify for cleaner air within their district, now electric buses versus CNG type buses, what's the infrastructure that a municipality would have to create to accommodate the various sources? Is there a comparison out there?
I don't know if there's any public data. I know that this is an exercise that the Los Angeles Metro MTA did 8 years ago. They did a significant study and converted 2,300 buses from diesel to natural gas. I would say if you contacted the MTA, you would get some information on that, and I believe what the MTA is doing now with these first orders of electric buses is really doing a technology evaluation. They certainly want to go to a cleaner air solution, and if they can do it with a technology that doesn't impact their planning or blocking of routes without significant infrastructure. Now, when they converted from diesel to natural gas, they did have to put in these stations, these natural gas stations, to do that. I don't believe there is a substantial amount of infrastructure. Probably some utility upgrades they need for putting in the charging stations, the nighttime charging stations. BYD's solution does not require in-route chargers, which can be a significant infrastructure cost. The Foothills Transit put in a competitor's transit and solution, and the cost of the infrastructure was almost equivalent to the cost of the buses they purchased, and they only purchased a number of buses. I think they've expanded that recently, so the cost per bus will go down as they expand. But we're talking for each in-route charging station about $1 million. BYD doesn't. Our solution doesn't require in-route charging, and so we have anticipated just a power adapter that goes at a 40 volt three-phase service at the garage. The power interface just pipes the AC direct to the bus, and the bus charges on the grid. So we do, in China they do staggered charging at night. It takes about 3.5 to 4 hours to charge the bus using that 40 volt three-phase. It's about an 80 amp drop per bus. So you're not going to want to charge a whole number of buses at the same time without upgraded service. But it's a dramatically less expense than in-route charging would be. So that's been one of the competitive advantages to a long-range electric bus, that you can charge it at night and pretty much drive it all day in your route service.
I would add to that and just expand on what you're saying slightly by letting you know, John, that there is a significant difference between the BYD technology and other electric vehicle technologies that are on the market that require, well, Clean Cities has been going through this development of EV infrastructure, EVSEs, pretty much across the country in every major metropolitan area that we can build out electric vehicle charging infrastructure. The significant difference with BYD technology is there is really no requirement for EV infrastructure because the charging system is built into the vehicle. So really all you need is an AC source of power that the bus can be plugged into, and the charging system itself is on the vehicle, whether it's the E6 model or whether it's the bus, which, you know, the first thing that came to my mind is how are you going to bring a vehicle when we have a standardized electric vehicle model in this country and recreate that model to where now you don't need the infrastructure, you just need the power. Are we going to have to build another kind of infrastructure to accommodate that? And I'm sure BYD has the answers to that somewhere in the future, but as a fleet application, that really is not, it's probably an advantage rather than a disadvantage.
That is correct. Yeah.
So does the federal government recognize this type of bus for meeting its standards for maybe grant opportunities?
So the answer is yes. As long as it meets Buy America compliance, you can access those federal dollars. Like Paul had called earlier, he was referencing, you know, most public transit companies access a dramatic amount of funding from the federal government, from the FTA, up to 70 to 80% of the capital cost, the upfront cost of buses, are normally paid for by the federal government, and that includes trains, that includes subways. The federal government substantially subsidizes those. So you have to be Buy America compliant in order to access those federal funds.
Just a question on my part: are you registered with the federal government as a I don't know proper terminology, maybe a vendor, as you would have to register with municipalities as a vendor to be able to bid or to be able to qualify for the bid process? Okay, so you are.
Yeah, that is correct. Right. In order to bid Long Beach, we had to be.
Right. Okay, back to the article again. There was an implication in there. In fact, it was a direct statement that the BYD bus was unsafe and that there had been some fatalities associated with the use of that vehicle. Can you speak to that?
So you know, I already said that we've had over 100 million miles, 100 million kilometers of service. That's about 63 million miles. So 100 million kilometers, 63 million miles of in-service data. In that period of time, there's been no fatalities with the electric buses. There have been some issues we've had with maintenance, mostly compressors. There has been no technology flaws, no safety flaws in those buses that have been running. There was, in the electric taxis, one fatality out of, I think, over 3 years, there were some 18 major accidents. One was a rear-end collision by a GTR, a Nissan, going over 150 miles per hour, rear-ended a taxi only going 50 miles per hour, immediately killing the occupants in the rear, and then the car was flung across the road into a tree, experiencing, I think the analysis later came out, and this was a study done by the Chinese government. The passengers experienced over 70 Gs. I think that your brain scrambles at about 18 to 20 Gs. And so unfortunately, the occupants were dead on impact, but the power interface, which is, I think it runs at 400 volts or 600 volts, the power interface was shoved up into the materials of the back seat. The car lit on fire. The interior of the car burnt. And this was a 3 a.m. crash, so there were very few people around. But when the people got there, I mean, the car was pretty much burnt up as you would experience in any gasoline car in that kind of a crash. what irony twist was, of course, the news media came out and said an electric car explodes in flames and blah, blah, blah. The opposite occurred. Out of the 90 some odd cells in the car, 72 of the cells were still functioning even after being exposed to high temperatures, and none of the cells rapidly disassembled or exploded, as some might term it. They all were intact, and therefore proved that the BYD iron phosphate battery is, as we claim, it is flame safe. You can put these batteries in direct flames, and they will not explode as competitors' batteries might. And we had a real-world test with a taxi where the internal materials lit on fire, and those cells were exposed to high heat for well over 30 minutes. In our test, we do a 2-hour test where we expose the iron phosphate pack to direct flames for 2 hours. And the pass-fail is that those cells cannot rapidly disassemble. They cannot hurt rescue workers if the car materials are on fire. So the answer to the question is there was in the media a fiery crash that occurred. It wasn't the result of being an electric car or a gasoline car. It was a car fire, as we see on the roads all the time, and that, in fact, it proved that BYD's iron phosphate chemistry is the most safe for these type of applications. And unfortunately, the driver and the 2 passengers were killed, but it wasn't killed because it was an electric vehicle. So again, our competitors have influenced Brian Addison to write something that was inaccurate. They didn't die because of a fiery bus crash. The bus is just as safe as any diesel bus and any petroleum-fueled cars. So EVs are safe to drive. In fact, I would say in most cases they are safer to drive than if you were driving a gasoline vehicle.
I can't argue that. So Brian's quote in the article where 3 people were incinerated to death after one of BYD's electric vehicles caught on fire in Shenzhen was misrepresented because those people were dead when the fire started.
That is correct. They were dead on impact, unfortunately. But there are car fires all the time. In fact, I don't know if you know the statistic, but there's a U.S. fire report that says 1 in every 4 fire department calls is for a car fire. Now, we don't have enough electric vehicles on the roads today for those to be electric vehicle car fires. Those are standard cars catching on fire, 1 in 4. So 25% of all of our all of the times our fire departments respond are for car fires. I don't think we realize how real electrical fires that occur in cars, how often they do occur. But unfortunately, this was misconstrued to sound like it was BYD's cars was unsafe. That is not true. That was false.
I'd like to.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I've always witnessed that when something comes up that's of value, there's always criticism. And first of all, I applaud BYD for even taking the challenge of coming into an established market, doing everything that they had to do to meet government requirements. This is a very expensive venture, and in the end, the proof is in the pudding. As I would always say, it's always going to come down to, in use what the real numbers are. I think they've done their research. I've seen a couple of BYD buses on the road, so I think it's a good push forward. It shakes up the competition. Okay, now we've got to become better. That's why we buy Hondas and Toyotas, and although we love Ford, it's made Ford's much better. But in the end, it's always going to be. It is what it is, and I always welcome challenge in the marketplace because I think it just makes everybody better, and I applaud BYD for coming here and taking on these challenges. And as far as the gossip and the misinformation, this is Hollywood. So we're going to get, if you wind up on the front of the Inquirer, it's all a good thing as far as I'm concerned, The only thing I want to know is, can I buy advertising space on your bus?
Yeah, we would love for you to do that. And I think it's interesting you actually talk about Honda and Toyota. I mean, my first car out of school was a Datsun 310, and it wasn't the highest quality car even back, and I won't date myself, this is the 80s, But I will tell you that Honda and Toyota, these Japanese companies that came out of World War II, of course, these were decimated companies. We helped them rebuild the steel industry. We helped them rebuild their auto industry. We even helped them with quality. I mean, some of our highest quality standards were applied. And those companies have now planted manufacturing in the U.S. to build products. And we applaud them for bringing these Japanese dollars to the U.S. to do manufacturing in the U.S. And, of course, it took about 50 years to get their quality right. The Koreans came to the U.S. We had the same problem with Kia and Hyundai. People complained about the quality. But you know what? Eventually the markets, bore out in about 10 years' time. The Korean quality met with the consumer expectation, and now we have Kia plants in Georgia. And, again, people don't have trouble with these Korean dollars going to factories in the U.S. Now, for the first time in history, a Chinese vehicle company has decided to use Chinese dollars to build American jobs, putting a factory in Lancaster, California. It may take, 3 to 5 years for the Chinese to catch up with the expectations of U.S. consumers, but I will tell you it will happen, and we should applaud any help to our U.S. economy coming from foreign entities. I want more Chinese firms to put more factories on American soil. I would want the media to support that instead of some of the backlash I've heard. Well, we've got a U.S. taxpayer dollars that are going to Chinese entities. They seem to be misled. All of our U.S. taxpayer dollars, 70% of every transit company's capital expense on a bus goes to a bus company. And unfortunately, the top bus companies, if you look at the top register, many of them aren't Canadian. If you look at subway companies or train companies, they're German and Swiss. We don't have any trouble with those taxpayer dollars going to the best technology, right? As long as they meet the 60% Buy America compliance. So I would hope that the media would pick up on this great story and say, hey, this is California buses being made by Californians in California. This is a great news story, and we want more Chinese companies, more Chinese-backed dollars bringing more factories to the U.S., and hopefully let's pour it into California, That's the story I would like to be transmitted versus the backlash on we don't want Chinese dollars. We're so arrogant, we don't want, their money because...
I think they're American dollars. China's just sending them back, that's all.
That's probably accurate.
But here's the question to that. I want to address that. The question then is, will those buses be marked on there, made in the USA?
I don't know. That's a great question. I don't know if they'll just be BYD branded buses, and you can order a Lancaster built BYD branded bus, or you could order a Chinese BYD bus. I don't know if there will be. That's a great marketing input.
I have question,
because today, if you're to look at the Kia built out of Macon, Georgia, I don't think you can tell the difference between the Kia out of Macon, Georgia, and the Kia that's coming from South Korea.
Well, the only way you can tell with the Honda cars is the VIN number started with a J if it was a Japanese-produced vehicle, and that's still the case today. And then they have different VIN numbers that identify. Yeah. So, but, as far as initially breaking into the market, that's probably not a bad idea, is to put that on every U.S.-produced vehicle.
That's a good buy.
I'd buy one.
And, okay, we're out of time. We're over time. Bert, did you have one additional question or comment you wanted to make before we close this out?
No, I think it's a fantastic show. I like what BYD had to say, and, considering all the challenges, I think they're doing a great job, but I still want advertising space on the side of that bus.
Great. Thank you. Thank you
all
both,
right, Micheal,
for letting us join the show.
Let's wind this down. I do want you to provide, obviously, Paul Condrand is the fleet manager for Culver City, California. He's also the vice president of MEMA, which represents over 200 fleets. If one of those fleets or Paul decides he wants to get back in contact with you, or anybody listening to this show says, you know what, okay, now I'm kind of clear on what's going on, I want to give BYD a shot, how can they do that? Who do they call? Who do they contact?
You know what? The best way is to go by email. My email is, and my first name is spelled a little differently than the normal Micheal. It's Micheal, Micheal.Austin AUSTIN, at BYD.com. And please send any inquiries to that they have, whether it's technical or RFQs, whatever they like. We would love to answer questions.
Very good. Well, that pretty much wraps up another episode of Breaking Our Oil Addiction with your host, Curtis Martin, and the Valley Clean Cities Coalition. We look for you next Thursday between 11 and 12, where we will be talking again about the topic of breaking this nation's oil addiction. Everything we do, every step we take leads this country in an economic and environmentally more secure position. And really what the ultimate benefit is that we're rebuilding the American economy by buying U.S.-made products and burning U.S.-made fuels in our vehicles. So until next week, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you then. Bye-bye.